Hello, everyone, and welcome to Market Talks. I'm Ray Salmond, head of markets at Cointelegraph. Here we discuss the latest in what's shaping the markets with valuable insights from industry leaders, traders, and influencers. On this week's episode of Market Talks, we have a very special guest, Mati Greenspan, who is the founder and CEO of Quantum Economics. Mati is an experienced financial analyst and a certified consultant who enjoys engaging with his 50,000 plus Twitter followers on topics like the latest developments in the cryptocurrency market, sentiment analysis, on-chain analysis, Bitcoin mining, and occasionally discussion of Fed policy, central bank policy, equities. He basically covers it all. Mati finds his passion in understanding financial markets and sharing his knowledge with others to help them make better investment decisions. Today's show is sponsored by Exco, and here's a short video about Mati. Hello, Mati Greenspan. How are you?
Well, thanks a lot for the intro, Ray.
Yeah. I hope I hit all the right. I hope I got all your credentials right.
Got it, man. Good enough.
What is quantum economics? What do you guys do? What's happening over there?
Yeah, so we're a firm for research and advisory in the crypto space. And we support more than a dozen projects right now. You can see that's on our website. The projects are in four different categories. So it's advisory, in-house, and then various partnerships. Our biggest success by far is Lunar Crush. You probably heard of them. Quantumeconomics.io is the website. And you can really see all of the different projects. We're involved in a Web3 social network called Woobits. MC Square Finance is building the future of wealth management on the blockchain, fully self-custody, cross-chain solution where people can mint tokens that represent their strategy. So basically, most people who invest in stocks, a very large percentage actually do it through index funds or wealth managers or stuff like that. None of that even exists yet. So we're building the infrastructure for that in a user-friendly way. Copernic Space is a space assets market place that's building up. Supremacy Game is a play-to-earn fighting game that has mech NFTs and their own in-game token. These are just a few of them. And I'd like to also drop some alpha, if I may. We're just about to open up a crowd fund on Quantum Expeditions, which is our Bitcoin mining venture. It's a project that we've been working on for 2 years now. And just basically, we notice what's happening in the markets. We can see the Ordinals, for example, right? Suddenly you can mint NFTs on Bitcoin. You can inscribe them on chain. So which opens up a whole world of everything that was crypto onto Bitcoin's main chain. And the SEC coming out and giving very clear guidance that everything except for Bitcoin is a security. And well, not that there's anything wrong with securities. I mean, that's big a part of fundraising and stuff like that. Problem is that they haven't defined how to sign up as a security, register with the SEC as a crypto project, and they basically put people in crypto projects in a black hole. But what we hear, which is very similar to what the Bitcoin maximalists are hearing, is that everything but Bitcoin is a security, meaning Bitcoin has a green light. So basically this project that we've been building for 2 years, we've secured everything. We've secured the power, we've secured the land, we've secured all the permits, we've onboarded the correct expertise to execute the project. And it's all Bitcoin related. And we're talking to these institutions. A lot of them, they're moving forward. They like the idea. They like that everything looks good on paper, but they take a lot longer to move. And many of them have even been adversely affected by what's happening in the banking industry. SVB, obviously, Silvergate and Signature Bank going down. So even the ones who haven't been directly affected are certainly a lot more cautious. And then what we've seen from the retail side is that retail investors are strong. And I saw an interview with Ray Dalio, who was basically saying that this recession is different because unemployment is remarkably low. We can see global unemployment at very low levels, meaning people have jobs, right? Obviously, inflation is still a little bit high, but just look at like things like Pepe, for example, right? And you can just see that people have money, they're willing to make an investment, they're willing to take a risk. You probably heard the term Bitcoin summer, and because of Ordinals, because of the SEC stance, I believe that we're full on headed into a Bitcoin summer, and that you can actually see on the charts if you want to share my screen. Is
Okay, so let's
the
go on the record with that.
Yeah.
Bitcoin summer is official. It's happening now. It's only up season, according to Mati Greenspan.
Well, never say only up. I remember when Dave Portnoy was talking about stocks only go up, and I was replying on every tweet of his, going, "Dude, you're an idiot. Things go up, things go down." Is it actually what I said was Bitcoin goes up and down, so maybe stocks only go up, but that remains to be seen. This is the Bitcoin dominance chart, which basically shows the total Bitcoin's share of the total crypto market cap. So if you add up all of the value of all of the coins in circulation, what percentage of that is just Bitcoin? And we can see that it's just surpassed 50% in the last few days for the first time since DeFi summer. And usually, Bitcoin's dominance only goes up when things are consolidating because people are selling off their valueless shitcoins and they're moving back into Bitcoin as a defense play. But here we can see that the Bitcoin dominance is rising as Bitcoin is going up, which is a very interesting dynamic. And I believe it's quite telling of what we're about to see in the future, given those two factors, the SEC and the ordinals. I believe people are about to realize in a big way that Bitcoin is the center of attention again.
To go back a little bit, I feel like this week and the end of last week is much different than 3 weeks ago. If you were to ask somebody what's going on in the crypto market, how do you feel about the crypto market, so on and so forth, a lot of has kind of happened to spur this euphoria, and none of it's really confirmed. But generally, from a bird's eye view of the crypto market, where are we? What do you see right now beyond the dominance of Bitcoin that's capturing your attention?
So this is the correlation with the S&P 500. And if you'll remember, when COVID first hit and the government started printing money like it was water, there was a massive dip in all assets across the board, and that included Bitcoin, right? And then, when COVID hit, there was the dip, and then when they started printing money, everything pulled out together. So we really saw at that time the correlation between the S&P 500, the stock market, and Bitcoin reached an all-time high. And then later on in 2021, when we saw DeFi summer, 2021 was when we really saw a direct correlation between the stocks and Bitcoin because it was then considered just like any other risk asset. So when risk assets were going up, and this is mainly, and according to our research, the main driver of Bitcoin's price is the US Federal Reserve. When they're printing money, that money has to find a home. And increasingly, it finds its home in stock markets and in Bitcoin. So they kind of react together to the Fed printing. But actually, what we see here is that the correlation between the two has now normalized, meaning that there isn't really this connection between the stock markets and Bitcoin anymore. And Bitcoin is now acting on its own fundamentals, wherein the Federal Reserve is kind of gotten predictable regarding their policy, that they're going to continue raising rates gradually until inflation comes down. We understand this. And now that the shock of the first few rate increases, actually the first few, it's one of the fastest rate increase cycles in history, that shock is worn off and they've tapered their pace of rate increases. Now we see actually the decoupling between the stock market and Bitcoin, and we can see it very
So,
clearly.
what's your take on that? Because the beta had not been there. NASDAQ, SPX, Dow, they've all been steamrolling for months on end, really. Um, I don't have my charts up, so I can't look at exactly when that reversal took place, but
What
you
I'd like
know,
to see.
they've just been steamrolling, just going up, 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 up. And after Bitcoin price hit 30K and kind of rejected there and sold off, we saw that beta break down, right? And it's not until really Friday or Thursday of last week and leading into this week that we've kind of seen Bitcoin play catch up with equities markets, right? So, in your view, what was the catalyst for that? Is it all these ETF applications from Fidelity, BlackRock, and others that are now rolling out? Is it the fact that the Fed actually paused rates? Because on the day that Powell came out and gave his presser and paused rates, I think equities continued to move up a little bit and Bitcoin sold off. We ended up tapping like 24.4K, right? And kind of like my view, not my personal view, but the thought in my mind was, ha 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 ha. Everyone's been talking about a Fed pivot for like more than a year now, almost 2 years. We get the supposed Fed pause and pivot that the market is completely biased toward, and Bitcoin and the whole market sells off. And of course, we can connect a lot of that selling off to Binance and Coinbase having these lawsuits with the SEC and the bridge between crypto and traditional finance kind of being broken in a banking sense. Like, I get that. But in your view, what is the catalyst right now that has Bitcoin basically at 29.9K right now? We're literally back at 30K. What changed between last Monday and today?
Yeah, I think that it does have a lot to do with. So first of all, we have a lot more clarity that kind of sell off, but it wasn't really a sell off when we saw the news about Bitcoin, sorry, Binance and Coinbase. Um, well, just look at Bitcoin on its own merits for the moment. But basically, it kind of was in decline, but it didn't really crash, right? And I believe, and obviously, blockchain data is anonymous, so it does require some interpretation. And what I believe is that the major players, right, BlackRock and Fidelity, they've been buying all along. First of all, we've had one of the strongest starts to a year, right? 2023, January, Bitcoin rose some 50% off of the lows. This is one of the strongest starts of a year in Bitcoin's history. And I believe that the institutional players have been buying all along, but they don't YOLO into it like us. They don't put the place market order, give me the price, whatever it is. What they do is they tend to set their orders just below the current price. So somewhere right over here, they'll backstop it from falling further, right? But they don't want to send the price up because they still have billions and billions of dollars that they want to load in. So every time they put that the price goes up, it makes all of their subsequent purchases more expensive. So they just layer their orders, their entry orders below the current price. So that's why when we see these type of things, I don't remember exactly the date of that. I remember they happened in the same day. I think it was right around here. It didn't really crash, right? It could have come down to the 200-day moving average pretty easily, but it didn't. And I believe that was because there's a large wall of entry orders just sitting here waiting to lap up the cheaper coins. And then when you have, just that sort of backstop, and then any buyer that's motivated, right, will send up the price because there's a lack of liquidity on the sell side. So if there's a lack of liquidity on the sell side, any motivated buyer like you or me is just going to send the price directly up. So I believe that that's what's been happening over the last few days. And especially now that they've made their plans public, that they're going into Bitcoin, people are starting to realize the dynamics that we mentioned earlier, right? Don't discount the Bitcoin dominance rising very fast. I believe that people are saying, wait a second, you know, Bitcoin was at 69K at the top of the hype in 21, right? And yeah, Coinbase might be in a bit of a trouble. Binance is in a bit of a pickle, but Bitcoin doesn't care about any of that. I mean, now, and especially now that Fidelity and BlackRock are providing the perfect, or they would like to provide a perfect on ramp for the institutions. I believe the speculators are getting very excited that we can start reclaiming these highs and even move forward into the next halving cycle.
So it sounds like to me that you believe this current momentum is driven by spot purchasing, that it's not a short squeeze happening right now. This whole move up from 16.8, 15.8K, the supposed bottom, to 30K, and the current retest from us going from like 24.5K last week to basically 30K now. Do you think that that's primarily spot driven, or is this just a squeeze on shorts?
Yes, I believe that it's primarily spot driven. I haven't noticed that Bitcoin's short interest is really sufficient to cause a significant sustained short squeeze. I mean, it might do on, for very short time frames, but how much selling, how much short selling is there out there that could cause this type of buy pressure? I don't think that a short squeeze makes a lot of sense. Maybe the last 2 days might be somewhat of that, where people were in a very bearish stance and now they're covering, their short positions. But I don't believe that's the major driver over time. And like I told you at the beginning of this interview, I mean, I'm not watching every little movement. I've been an account manager in a lot of different online brokers before, and I've literally seen probably more than 100,000 traders come into the markets and lose their shirt. Um, that's because they have a short term outlook. They take on too much leverage and they don't diversify their portfolio. Anybody who wants to make money in the market thinks long term, is thinking like, where is the price going to be at? Where's the utility going to be at in 5 years or 10 years from now? And then just stick to your guns and hold on to those positions. And this play works really well with Bitcoin. And you might, and this is why the Bart Simpson pattern is so common on Bitcoin, right? Because we see like some of these options closing and all of a sudden Bitcoin goes up, boom. And then it trades normally, right? People buying and selling normally. And then, the other options expires, boom, right? So this is basically a very classic Bitcoin play. And then the reverse can happen, right? The reverse Bart Simpson. But the invisible hand is very much at work on Bitcoin, constantly conducting the price, meaning that a whale might come in and think he's a big shot for pushing the price by 3% or 5% with a few $1,000,000. And I believe that institutions like BlackRock, I mean that's chump change for them. They probably try and do that kind of stuff all the time. However, the market of Bitcoin is global, and it's extremely liquid. It's one of the most liquid markets in the world by now, to the point where if somebody is able to do those type of price manipulations, or if a news event is able to have an impact on a short period of time, that impact through the manipulation or through the news event is going to be reversed over time, simply by a matter of the market doing its thing, people buying and selling. Long term, the price is guided very much by overall global sentiment, and I believe that throughout the bear market, we've had a bit of a downer as far as the sentiment and the outlook of people thinking about Bitcoin and what's its future. But now that business activity is coming out of hibernation, and that the rate cycles from the Fed, I mean, the effect of which are tapering off, right? We're not in, and because this recession has such a low unemployment rate, that people are looking out there to make investments. GameStop changed the world as far as like how retail investors look at the markets. And I was witness to when Ameritrade first became a thing, and everybody from their home could suddenly buy stocks on the internet, and how much that revolutionized things. But then once the 2008 crisis happened, the immediate effect of Occupy Wall Street, right, was that everybody goes, wait a second, why aren't we into this stock market thing too, right? And it takes a while for the education to catch up, for people to understand that, okay, well, don't day trade because you're just giving your money to the rich people, right? And have a long-term outlook, and choose your investments well and think long-term. And then you see like Wall Street bets and meme coins rising, and you can see that there is a huge push towards retail and a knowledge and an expertise within the retail markets that never existed before. And now, coupled with the economic conditions at this moment in time, retail investors are extremely strong, and I believe that they're the ones guiding the markets. Not necessarily in the United States either. This is a global movement. This is happening across the world, and particularly in developing economies. Um, I believe that Nigeria at the moment has the highest Bitcoin adoption. Above 45% according to Business Insider. And I believe it too because I speak with people and it's like when you have somebody who a contractor or whatever anywhere in the world, right? And we've got more than 40 contractors in quantum economics. Uh, every one of them, 100% prefer to receive Bitcoin than any other currency. I sent as part of my financial license, I have to take annual courses with the AIMF. This year is particularly interesting because we're learning about MiCA and the European regulations of crypto. So I felt this year instead of buying the cheapo courses that you just click through, I'm going to buy the expensive ones, and it was 240 euros for one single course, and they had me send a bank wire, and my bank charged me about 30 euros for the transfer. And then the intermediary bank, which I didn't know that there was going to be an intermediary bank somewhere in Austria, apparently, when I checked the paperwork, charged another 15 euros. So when the money arrived at the IMF, they're like, well, you're 15 euros short. And I'm like, but I put the amount, I
Another
registered
one.
that I was sending but they took their little bite because the money's passing through their system, right? And there's absolutely no transparency, and I have no recourse on this whatsoever.
Yeah, it's
Um,
exploitation. Hence the reason why Bitcoin adoption in Argentina, Venezuela, Lebanon, Nigeria, Syria, Iran, Pakistan, India. That's the reason why, right? Better remittances.
I have a financial license from European Union, but like literally, I'm focused 100% of my time and energy on crypto. I'm looking at this Bitcoin block half countdown. You can see it on my screen here. 310 days, 2 hours, and I'm looking at the effect of ordinals on Bitcoin, which is that there's a lot more activity than there has been in a very long time on Bitcoin. This is the mempool, which represents the unconfirmed transactions. This is where, um, well, this chart looked very big at the time, and then it got put to
Hmm.
shame, right? There basically 400 and more than almost a half a million unconfirmed transactions on Bitcoin's chain, waiting to be confirmed. And right now we're back up at 250,000. However, and here's the kicker is that Bitcoin seems to be adapting to the new activity, like a really well and much better than I ever anticipated. Because here you can see the number of transactions in the blockchain per day, right? And this is a 3-year chart, and you like look, this year is through the roof. People are using, there's more transactions happening on Bitcoin, really than ever before, like by a wide margin, right? And then and here's where it gets really interesting. The cent coins per day is not that impressive compared to like 2021 DeFi summer. We saw much higher volumes on the Bitcoin blockchain. But here's the fun part: is look at these transaction fees. And over here, I was really starting to sweat it. I was going, ordinals are going to kill Bitcoin, right? This is a 7-day average, but they did, I believe, get to around $30, $40 per transaction on
Yeah.
average at that time. But now look, are they back where even though the mempool is still what we would consider flooded, those transaction fees have come down. Don't ask me how the maths work on this, Ray. I promise you I don't know. But to me, what it says, and I mean the number of ordinals coming out have tapered somewhat, but they're certainly a lot more than they were, you know, let's say beginning of the month, right? Um, so there's still ordinals being inscribed on Bitcoin, and the mempool is still flooded, but somehow average transaction fee has come down. If you can explain this to me, maybe that would be pretty cool, honestly.
I know a few miners, so I will ask them, and if I get a good answer, I'll message that to you privately. Would you rather talk about what you think will be the catalysts that bring us back into a bull market, whether or not those will be the same as previous cycles or different this time around?
Well, I think that we're already in a bull market, Ray. People just don't realize it yet.
Oh man, that's hot.
People.
That's hot.
I see business activity coming out of hibernation. I see it. We've been building right through the bear markets. I see it.
So I really appreciate you coming on and taking so much time to answer all of these questions in detail and to go on the record and share some pretty profound perspectives on the market and Bitcoin. So I think the takeaway here is that ordinals are bullish for Bitcoin price, for Bitcoin miners, for Bitcoin users, for creators, for DApp builders, for artists. Um, we are in Bitcoin summer right now, as per the Bitcoin dominance metric. And Mati Greenspan even says that we are already in a bull market, which is huge. You're probably the first person out there to come out on the record and say that. So make sure you come back and collect your laurels and accolades later when it's confirmed.
Yeah, and I want to give disclaimers as well. We did,
Oh, yeah, I
display
forgot about
chart.
all those.
Yeah, that past performance does not tell the future. When you look at a chart, it just shows you what happened in history, not what's going to happen next. There are any number of things that can change things. Obviously, the opinions that I've expressed are those of myself only, not those of Cointelegraph or quantum economics. And of course, none of what I've said here is investment advice, nor is it an inducement to invest in any sort of securities.
Likewise, yeah, we're just two old men who like digital money and magic money, and we're just talking about where the price is, where it might go, the Lindy effect of this new technology, when it will see mass adoption, and we're just both bullish on Bitcoin, but none of it is financial advice. So thank you for saying that. Thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. You are welcome to come on to our show or any Cointelegraph content anytime. Doesn't matter. Just give us a call and come on. I want to thank all the viewers for tuning in,
Appreciate
and
it.
you've been watching
That's,
Market
that's an
Talks. We're
awesome
here
offer.
every Thursday.